I think it's one heck of a job, isn't it, to prepare your child for this role, unlike any other role in the country, unlike anything that any of his contemporaries, his friends at school or out of school, are going to have to face. But I also think that they are keen to delay that moment, really, that he has the full realization of his destiny. I think they really are trying very hard to let George just have the childhood he needs and deserves. At the same time, he has got to be, well, he'd have to be incredibly stupid not to be aware of what the future holds, because of all that he's gone through recently. I mean, the death of his great grandmother, and then the coronation of his grandfather, big state events, which must have focused that young mind of his on what lies ahead. But I think they gradually are introducing him to the public. We see him quite often on the public stage now, be it extremely formal like those state occasions, or relatively informal like at the football, or even at the Taylor Swift concert. So we're getting used, and he's getting used to the fact that he is going to be in the papers and on camera for most of his life. But at the same time, I think for as long as possible, they're keeping George and the other children wrapped up, just enjoying life, playing outside, running free. And that, I think, augurs well for a balanced and healthy future for George. I think William was introduced rather more quickly into royal life. There were a lot more, it seems to me, occasions when he was placed, but it seemed almost like a parade in front of the cameras, including the cameras that I was with at the BBC, you know, a big barrage of cameras that he had to face when he went to Eton, or when he went on his first engagement to Wales. And that must be quite daunting for a young boy. And I think that Catherine has done really well to limit the exposure that George has had by providing the press with photographs that she's taken. You know, having your mum take a pic of you isn't too frightening at all. And that has kept the hungry media happy. So I think she's found a better way, perhaps, than Diana was able to. We're told certainly that the king loves spending time with his grandchildren, and now that he is at Windsor a fair bit more, has been, and the kids are, you know, just down the road, really. I think they have been getting together more. On the other hand, there have been a lot of health problems, obviously, in both sides of the family. And the king has been spending time at either Highgrove or Balmoral. But as we understand, William and Catherine are going to Balmoral, and the kids are going to be there. There'll be time to knock around. And I think it is important, yes, for George to see what being king looks like in action. And I don't imagine that Charles takes George on one side and sort of tells him, "Look, boy, this is the future for you." I think it's much more just grandfatherly relationship, because I think they want to protect George from sort of worrying and getting anxious about the future. He doesn't need to think about that now. He needs to think about kicking a ball around and having fun and going swimming, and having picnics and barbecues. I suppose in good time he will have to be taught more about the Constitution. Certainly Elizabeth, the late Queen, was taken aside from Margaret when it became clear that she was going to be Queen. She became heir. And so she has separate lessons to Margaret about history and the Constitution. And maybe the same will apply to George. I rather doubt it, though. I rather doubt it. I think things are a lot more informal these days. There will be things that he will have to know and have to learn, but I think he will assimilate them as time goes by. And I think that William and Catherine will be very keen to delay the moment he has to take up royal duties as long as possible. Now, that might not be easy, because in the slimmed down royal family, there aren't enough royals to go round. And so the pressure may mount in the next, let's see, 10 to 15 years for him to become a full-time royal. But I'm sure that Catherine particularly wants her little boy, who's now getting quite a big boy, I suppose, to have the opportunity to do other stuff It'll probably be in the military, or it might be voluntary work or something like that, because Catherine is so keen and has been keen on showing George and the other children that what you put in, you get out. I mean, she took him to that baby bank, and we saw on camera her saying, "You see, George, if you do things for others, you feel rewards yourself." And so maybe something in the voluntary field might beckon before the seriousness, the gravity of the role ahead. And it is a serious role. Being monarch is quite onerous, and you couldn't have a more responsible job, really. And I think that hopefully by the time he becomes a full-time royal, he will have learned and been taught by his parents that using the platform that you've been given in life, using it for good, and to confront difficult issues and help people in difficulty is really worthwhile. Which is why, William has said that when they drive to school, sometimes they see people sleeping rough, and he's told George and the others, look, people are in need. You're very, very privileged, but there's lots of needy people, and our job really is to do what we can to help. William remembers very keenly that he was taken to see the homeless by Diana. And I think that Catherine is completely on board with this idea that this meant a lot to William, and he has maintained his support and interest in homeless charities throughout his life. I think they're probably hoping the way they're bringing George up, he too will want to follow in those footsteps. And they're certainly not shielding him from the fact that there are a lot of very disadvantaged and needy people out there, and that he will be in a position to do something to help. Having a close-knit bunch of friends when you're royal is pretty difficult. And I'm sure George is going to learn that if you're unwise and befriend someone who isn't kind of sworn to secrecy, if you like, what you say and what you do is going to get plastered all over the papers. It'll probably be a difficult lesson to learn. I think William has learned it. Harry certainly has learned it. But he does have school friends that, he's quite close to. He has cousins. I think it's great that the younger generation of royals, there's quite a few of the same age, the Tyndalls and everything, and they knock around together. And then there's the slightly older ones of Beatrice and Eugenie. They're an interesting clan, and I think they will all help George to choose his friends wisely. But Mum is the one who will guide him best. And I think she's showing us that she's a brilliant mother, very caring mother. She's got a difficult job guiding him through this life. But I think if anyone can do it, Catherine can. Well, he's got a couple more years at Lambeth with his siblings, which I think is lovely. They've all been kept together. That's another mark, I think, of Catherine's method of parenting. But he will have to move on. I hope, but it's probably a hopeless hope, that they'll keep him as a day boy somewhere, and he'll come home every evening. I would have thought that was what Catherine would want. Having said that, she went to boarding school. I think she enjoyed it. Lots and lots of sport. So we'll probably see him go off to boarding school, maybe just a weekly boarder. I just hope he still is kept at home as long as possible, as much as possible. And then, well, I suppose university, probably, because his parents both had a blast at university. They met at university. They loved it. So he will probably head off to university. And then the options are very, very limited, aren't they, for a future king? And I think that's very difficult for a young man. I know all his mates will be saying, even in the next few years, what do you fancy doing in life? What do you want to do? Well, nearly all those options are closed to George, because he knows what he's going to have to do sooner or later. But I guess he might go in the military. I'd like to think he might maybe not do that, and maybe do voluntary work, or maybe do both. But I think that we probably won't see him as a full-time royal until it's deemed absolutely necessary, that we are so in need of royal patronages that he just has to step up full-time.